I'm just curious. It's disappointing that you don't have access to former Attorney General Sessions, and maybe we got to look at that whole process as well, so that you can do these, deeper investigations and have cooperation from relevant witnesses. But their assumption that they were going to be able to do a parallel track, okay, so they could prosecute apparently the parents under a criminal statute within 72 hours, so that their kids who were going to be put in HHS custody within 72 hours, so that separation would not occur. As absurd as that sounds to me, it would be helpful if you gave your opinion. Was that willful ignorance? I mean, knowing the mechanics of both processes, it seems to me that there's no way someone could realistically assume that was going to happen. I mean, that's just fantasy, in my opinion. But you had a chance to look at it more closely, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Congressman, we found it was a practical and legal impossibility in almost all circumstances. And had there been, frankly, minimal due diligence by talking to the U.S. attorneys themselves, the Marshal Service, DHS, HHS, the judges, the courts who were not consulted in advance, that would have been readily understood. But I'll have to say also, as a former AUSA prosecutor myself, I'm a little out of date. I was prosecutor in the 90s. But the notion that you could expect to put someone in the Marshal Service custody, get them in front of identify who they really are, right? You've got a person coming across the border. The whole purpose of this is to make sure that before you prosecute someone for a misdemeanor violation, that they aren't, for example, a drug dealer or some other serious violator of the law that would result in a felony, and a much more serious felony. Right, so the Marshal Service needs some time to figure out who this person is, if they really are who they say they are. Then you've got to get them to a prosecutor. The prosecutor has to write a complaint, get it to the court. You got to get a judge. The judge has to take not only a guilty plea, but then has to sentence the defendant. And that assumes the defendant's willing to plead guilty. That assumption may be faulty. Not everybody shows up and says, I'm pleading guilty right away. They get a defense lawyer. As we noted, the courts had a problem. They needed to find defense lawyers for all these new defendants, right? So you need to get a defense lawyer lined up. There's all sorts of things that had to happen. And the notion that all of that could happen in the majority of these cases, let alone many, in 72 hours, as we found, we thought was a practical and legal impossibility.